The funny thing about people who throw dirt is that they forget. Dirt only sticks if you stop moving. My dear chosen ones, let that sink in before anything else, because the very mouths that tried to stain you are now choking on their own storytelling. It's poetic, isn't it? They aimed for a character assassination, but accidentally produced a documentary about their own insecurities. That's what happens when someone declares war on a person who wasn't even looking in their direction. Their attempt to bury you became the very ground you rose from. That's not coincidence. That's the silent power of someone who was never meant to blend in. Chosen ones, listen closely. People don't gossip about those beneath them. They gossip about those they fear might outrun them. You didn't trigger their hate by doing something wrong. You triggered it by doing something right. You became a quiet reminder of everything they weren't willing to become. And instead of self-improvement, they chose self-distraction. You became their favorite conversation, not because you were flawed, but because you were fascinating. The world loves a mystery, and you, my chosen one, were born to be one, not a public file for insecure minds to rewrite. When they couldn't match your growth, they tried to match your name with rumors. That's how the game works. When they can't outshine, they try to overshadow. But here's what their strategy failed to consider. Shadows only exist where there is light, and chosen ones were never meant to dim. They thought the crowd would question you, but the crowd questioned them. After all, who studies someone they claim not to care about? Who monitors, comments, repeats and retells if they are truly unbothered? The irony is painful for them. My chosen ones, understand this truth. The moment people notice that someone is obsessed with your reputation while you're busy building your reality, the entire storyline collapses without you even speaking. They wanted you to break. They expected you to respond, defend, or fall apart. Instead, you evolved so quietly that when they repeated old stories, they sounded outdated, like someone still bragging about high school trophies in adulthood. While they were trying to keep you trapped in yesterday, you upgraded into someone they no longer recognized. And that, right there, is where the shift began. Before we move forward, chosen ones, if this message is speaking to you, strengthening you, or waking something powerful inside you, take a moment to support this platform. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. Your support fuels the time, energy, research, and passion it takes to bring you content that empowers, heals, and reminds you who you are. Every like, comment, and subscription helps us keep creating life-changing, mind-shifting, and energy-boosting messages for people just like you. Stay connected, stay elevated, and let's grow together. You might ask, but why me? Why was I the target? Because chosen ones, you are noticed without trying. You walk into a room and alter the atmosphere without opening your mouth. You are remembered without introducing yourself twice. You are studied because you cannot be copied, and that alone threatens every person who found comfort in conformity. You never needed a spotlight. Your presence was one. Their problem was never that you were wrong. It was that you were real. Real intimidates, fabricated every single time. Remember this quote: "A lie has speed, but truth has stamina." They sprinted with rumors, but you walked with integrity, and integrity always outlasts noise. While they were running laps with your name in their mouth, they didn't realize they were burning their own credibility calories. Eventually, people began asking the right questions. Why does every story about you come from the same direction? Why is the storyteller more emotional than factual? Why does their tone sound personal rather than informative? When curiosity matures, truth becomes obvious. My chosen ones, wear your authenticity like armor. You didn't lose anything during that smear campaign. You gained clarity. You gained self-awareness. You gained silent admiration from people who were observing from the background. The same ones who once listened are now thinking, maybe the problem was never you, and the shift is happening right now, not because you fought back, but because you outgrew the battlefield. So to those who tried to break you with casual conversations, here's your final quote. When you speak of someone with hate in your tone, the world hears your wounds, not their flaws. Chosen ones, walk forward knowing this. They thought their gossip was a weapon, but it became your promotion. They tried to dim your existence, but ended up highlighting your value. They tried to turn people away from you, but only exposed who needed to be removed. Their downfall was never your hands, it was their obsession. And now, the world isn't asking what happened to you, they're asking what's wrong with them. Chosen ones, before we dive deeper into how their gossip collapsed and your value skyrocketed, take a second to anchor yourself in this moment. If you've ever felt misunderstood, judged, or talked about for simply existing in your truth, then you're in the right place. Show your support by liking this video, subscribing and commenting "I rise regardless" if you're ready to turn every rumor into a reason to level up. Your engagement keeps this movement alive, fuels future content, and reminds the world that chosen ones don't break, they evolve. Now, stay with me, because what comes next may feel like your life story being narrated out loud. Number 1. Gossip didn't reveal your weakness, it exposed their need for validation. When they tried to downplay you, they accidentally broadcast their own need to matter. The louder someone speaks about you, the clearer the world hears what they're lacking. My dear chosen ones, let's break this down with precision, because this isn't just drama, this is human behavior on display. When their mouths started sprinting with your name, they thought they were doing character damage, but what they truly did was self-expose. Every sentence, every rumor, every exaggerated detail they shared was never proof of your flaws. It was proof of their hunger for relevance. They tried to sell the world the illusion that they were informing, warning, or simply keeping it real. But anyone who has ever observed people long enough knows that those who speak the most about others often have the least going on for themselves. Chosen ones, have you ever wondered why someone would invest that much breath, energy, and creativity into another person's life? Why they had timelines and details about you that even you forgot? Why they remembered your past more clearly than they focused on their own present? The answer is simple, yet they never saw it coming, because your name gave them a stage they couldn't build on their own. They didn't want people to look at you. They wanted people to look at them while pretending to look at you. They thought your story would be their shortcut to attention. They believed that if they dragged your image through conversations, somehow they could appear relevant simply by mentioning you. But here's what they didn't calculate. People are smarter than they used to be. Humans read tone faster than they read words. We feel intention before we process information, and your haters didn't realize their tone was screaming louder than their message. They weren't sharing facts, they were auditioning for significance. They weren't warning people. They were begging for attention. They weren't exposing anything about you. They were exposing everything about themselves. Chosen ones, let me address a question that might have sat heavy in your heart. Why would they keep talking if they know it's not true? Because truth wasn't their goal. Relevance was to them. Silence meant invisibility, and invisibility terrified them more than being wrong. They believed that attaching your name to their narrative would keep them from disappearing in the background of their own life. They weren't storytellers. They were attention borrowers. Imagine someone who desperately wants the spotlight, but doesn't know how to create their own shine. What do? They attempt to dim yours and stand near the shadow, hoping someone mistakes them for the source. But chosen ones, the problem with that strategy is that energy doesn't lie. When someone speaks from emptiness, it echoes. When someone speaks from insecurity, it leaks. And when someone speaks from jealousy, it stains them, not the person they're talking about. The world eventually caught on. People started asking the real questions. Why are you so focused on them? How do you know so much about someone who doesn't even mention you? Why is their name always coming from your mouth more than your own goals, passions, or growth? That's when the shift happened. Not because you defended yourself, but because they exposed themselves. The conversation stopped being about whether the information was true and shifted into why they cared so much. It wasn't your reputation that became questionable, it was their identity. Chosen ones, let me give you a metaphor. If a person constantly serves food but never eats, eventually people notice that they aren't hungry for truth, they're hungry for attention. When someone keeps presenting news about you, but you never respond, never retaliate, never engage, they become the only performer on stage. And an audience can only watch one-sided obsession for so long before realizing it's not journalism. It's an obsession disguised as concern. Their gossip didn't reveal where you were weak. It revealed where they were empty. It showed that their self-worth needed an external anchor. You became their emotional reference point. Without you, they had no topic strong enough to be remembered. And that is the real tragedy. Not what they said, but how much they needed to say it to feel relevant. Chosen ones, your existence became evidence that they didn't have one. And in the end, your silence was more powerful than their storytelling. You didn't have to defend your character, because their behavior defended yours. Their tone betrayed their motive. Their consistency betrayed their insecurity, and their obsession betrayed their identity. Remember this. When someone tries to make you look small, what they're really showing is how tiny they feel beside you. So stand tall, chosen ones. You don't need to correct rumors. You don't need to chase truth. You don't need to match their volume. Your life, your growth, and your presence will always be the loudest evidence in the room. Number 2. The more they studied you, the faster respect quietly shifted in your direction. When their obsession became obvious, respect quietly walked across the room and stood beside you. My dear chosen ones, let's get brutally honest here. Nobody can pretend forever. Not even the ones who thought they were running silent campaigns against you. There comes a moment when the spotlight they tried to put on you flips back and exposes them instead. And that exact moment, that subtle but powerful shift, is where everything changes. People started to see it. The way they watched you like it was their unofficial occupation, the way they reacted to your smallest moves, the way your name lived rent-free in their minds while you never even mentioned theirs. That wasn't normal attention. That was fixation disguised as commentary. And chosen ones, the world may be slow sometimes, but it is not blind. When someone becomes too invested in tearing you down, people eventually start questioning why. And when there's no logical reason, no conflict, no rivalry, no betrayal, the whole thing starts to look like obsession. Your haters thought they were just keeping it real, telling people how it is, or warning others. But their tone betrayed their motives, their consistency betrayed their emotional state, and their fixation betrayed their insecurity. They didn't realize that when someone spends excessive amounts of time talking about a person who isn't even responding, it exposes a level of emotional involvement that normal, stable, purposeful people do not entertain. Chosen ones, you must understand something powerful. When someone invests that much energy into your existence, it signals something deeper: fascination, comparison, envy, or inadequate self-worth. People saw that they weren't just commenting occasionally. They were watching every post, analyzing every achievement, repeating every detail, and digging for any scrap that could be used as a narrative weapon. And when people compared your silence to their obsession, admiration naturally shifted toward you. Because self-control always carries more respect than self-exposure. They didn't expect that their own behavior would reveal the truth without you ever needing to utter a single word. They thought attention equals credibility, but in reality, balance equals credibility. People don't respect loudness. They respect emotional discipline. They don't respect repetition. They respect evolution. They don't respect gossip. They respect growth. And you, chosen one, embodied growth without effort. While they were busy explaining your life, you were busy improving it. While they were narrating your story, you were rewriting it. While they were trying to prove that you were nothing special, their obsession proved you were unforgettable. The world recognized that you weren't part of the drama. You were simply the inspiration for it. That subtle difference is what elevated you. You didn't try to win. You simply kept moving forward. And every time they spoke your name, the respect that should have belonged to them quietly detached itself and came to you, because people admire those who are too focused to respond. They admire those who don't waste energy fighting shadows. They admire those who are too committed to their purpose to entertain foolishness. And that's why respect landed in your lap effortlessly, because your actions, priorities, and silence showed emotional maturity, self-awareness, and confidence. You acted like someone who had bigger things to do because you did. Meanwhile, they acted like someone who had nothing else to offer because sadly they didn't. And that contrast became impossible for anyone to ignore. Chosen ones, hear this clearly. The world saw that their life revolved around you, and yet your life didn't even include them. That is the highest level of silent victory, when someone invests everything into your downfall, but you invest nothing into proving yourself. You automatically win. Their overinvestment became their exposure, and your lack of involvement became your crown. Respect is not something you shout for. It is something you attract with composure. And while they were busy scrambling for attention, you were becoming the example people wanted to follow. You became the symbol of calm, strength, emotional maturity, and evolution. They became a reminder of what happens when someone loses themselves while trying to destroy someone else. So let this be known, chosen ones. You didn't get respected because you were loud. You didn't get respected because you fought back. You got respected because you didn't need to. When they overplayed their hand, you became the quiet champion. When they exposed their obsession, you revealed your self-control. And when they lost their focus on their own life, you advanced in yours. Chosen ones, respect didn't just shift. It returned to its rightful owner. Number 3. Their constant talk became a spotlight that turned curiosity into quiet admiration. When they became addicted to watching you, respect quietly walked away from them and landed at your feet. My dear chosen ones, there comes a moment in every powerful person's journey when the audience stops looking at the one speaking the loudest and starts paying attention to the one living the most. That moment happened for you. The second people realized just how deeply others were invested in your every move. The shift wasn't loud, dramatic, or announced. It was subtle, silent, and undeniable, like watching a shadow detach from its owner and follow the one holding the real light. You see, chosen ones, the world has an interesting way of measuring value. It doesn't always rely on accomplishments, awards, or public declarations. Sometimes the true measure of a person's relevance is found in how much space they occupy in the minds of others, especially in the minds of those who claim not to like them. When your name became a constant topic in conversations you weren't present for, you weren't losing dignity, you were gaining intrigue. When they spoke about you in circles you didn't belong to, you weren't being attacked, you were being branded. And when they monitored your life with a level of detail even you didn't track, you weren't being targeted, you were being studied like someone worth documenting. Onlookers are not blind. The world pays close attention when someone pays too much attention to someone who doesn't acknowledge them. People aren't as naive as your haters hoped they can spot emotional investment from a distance. And while your critics believed that continuous commentary would turn people against you, what it really did was expose an imbalance, an obsession that felt suspiciously personal. At some point, people stopped hearing the gossip and started hearing the tone. They heard insecurity. They heard desperation. They heard envy disguised as information. My dear chosen ones, have you ever wondered why respect suddenly shifted toward you without your effort, your explanation, or your defense? It's because others recognized something real. Your silence had more power than their storytelling. The world saw you focused, evolving, building, and staying grounded, while they saw your haters stuck in a loop, narrating your life louder than they narrated their own dreams. And respect always gravitates to the one who chooses progress over pettiness. Think about it. Why would someone dedicate hours analyzing another person's choices if they were satisfied with their own life? Why would someone keep highlighting your existence if they didn't secretly believe it outshined theirs? Why would they repeat your story if their own wasn't interesting enough to share? That is where admiration began, not from what you said, but from what you didn't say. People saw your character through your reaction, not your reputation. While others tried to paint you, you let your reality develop naturally. While they talked, you transformed. While they attempted to shrink your presence, you expanded without needing an audience. It became crystal clear who held emotional control and who had lost it. Chosen ones, understand this. Obsession always reveals status. The person being watched isn't the follower. They are the leader. You didn't ask to be admired. Admiration became the only reasonable response when comparison became unavoidable. They accidentally created curiosity, and curiosity is the gateway to fascination. People wanted to know, what makes this person worth discussing so much? Why are others so invested? What power are they holding that no one is saying out loud? Once people looked beyond the gossip, they saw your consistency. And consistency is the highest form of credibility. No drama, no clapbacks, no emotional breakdowns, just growth, focus, elevation, and self-respect. That image will always outweigh any rumor spoken by someone who has nothing real to show. Slowly, admiration became automatic, and the respect your haters tried to steal from you became theirs to lose. They became the example of wasted energy, while you became the example of controlled evolution. Your identity didn't need defending because it was never built on public opinion. It was built on quiet progression. And so, chosen ones, let this be your reminder. When people talk about you more than they talk about their goals, they don't expose your life. They expose their lack of one. Respect didn't shift because you demanded it. Respect shifted because you earned it without trying. Number 4, their mission to shrink. You only made your presence impossible to ignore. When they tried to cut your light, they accidentally turned you into the main attraction. My dear chosen ones, this is where the plot twist becomes cinematic. Every attempt they made to shrink you became the very spotlight that revealed how impossible you were to silence. They thought that if they whispered long enough, repeated rumors consistently enough, and sprinkled enough negativity around your name, the world would turn away from you. They believed that if they threw shade, you would fade. But they underestimated the power of someone who shines from within, not from approval, validation, or outside permission. They forgot that real value is not determined by public opinion. It is exposed by contrast, and they volunteered to be that contrast. People noticed that while they were desperately working overtime to dim your influence, you weren't even aware of their campaign. They thought they were being strategic, but to everyone watching, they looked desperate. Their behavior became the highlighter that revealed your inner strength. Think about it, chosen ones. When someone tries that hard to convince others that you are not valuable, the question becomes, why are they so afraid of your shine? Because nobody tries to dim a bulb that isn't on. They only target what threatens their comfort zone. You didn't have to fight, shout, or prove anything. All you did was continue being yourself, and that alone exposed the truth. Your haters thought silence would make you invisible, but instead, it made you unbothered, and that unbothered energy became magnetic. While they were hosting conversations, you were hosting growth. While they were analyzing your life, you were advancing in it. While they were trying to control how people viewed you, you were letting reality handle the evidence. And reality always wins. Chosen ones, your calmness confused them. They expected reactions, breakdowns, sadness, anger, or retaliation. They wanted to see you defend, explain, argue, or shrink. But your refusal to lower your vibration made everyone see who was really in control, and it wasn't them. Their mission was to dim you. However, instead of reducing your glow, they exposed theirs. And here's the ironic truth. The harder someone tries to hide your brightness, the brighter it appears, because effort exposes intention. People started questioning their motives, not your character. They started paying attention to patterns, tone, and consistency. They realized that someone who is genuinely confident does not waste time trying to destroy another person's image. So while they were busy pushing narratives, what people actually observed was insecurity, fear, jealousy, and emotional instability. And while they were trying to highlight what they claimed was wrong with you, your strength, composure, and emotional maturity highlighted everything that was real about you. You see, chosen ones, real light cannot be shut off. It can only be noticed. Real character cannot be hidden. It is proven in silence. Real value cannot be erased. It is revealed through pressure. Your existence became a mirror, and they didn't like what they saw. Instead of working on themselves, they tried to work against you. But here's the law of natural energy. When you try to push down what naturally rises, you don't stop the rise, you expose your effort. And that is exactly what happened. They didn't just fail, they failed publicly. In trying to dim you, they became the ones who looked dull. In trying to silence you, they became the ones who looked loud. In trying to present you as questionable, they became the ones who looked unstable. Suddenly, the audience wasn't whispering about you. They were whispering about them. People now remember you for your steady presence, grounded energy, and unshakable confidence. They remember them for their noise, envy, and attempts that backfired. Your haters became your campaign managers without pay, without strategy, and without realizing they were promoting exactly what they were trying to hide, your undeniable shine. Chosen ones never forget this. The moment someone tries to dim you, they admit they can see your light. And once light is noticed, it cannot be unseen. Their whispers became your applause. Their criticism became your credibility. Their efforts became your elevation. That is the power of someone who never needed to prove anything, only continue being everything. Number 5. Their energy was a full-time battle while you didn't swing once. When they fought with fire, you walked through it without even feeling the heat. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about one of the most powerful turning points in this whole situation. The moment everyone realized that the energy invested into tearing you down was only flowing from one direction. That was the moment everything clicked for the observers, the bystanders, the silent analyzers, and even the ones who were unsure whose side to lean toward. See, chosen ones, nothing exposes truth faster than energy imbalance. When one side is exhausting themselves with negativity while the other is minding their peace, it becomes painfully obvious where insecurity lives and where emotional maturity thrives. And that, right there, was one of the biggest reasons why their nasty gossip backfired so brutally that even those who entertained it started distancing themselves from the storytellers. Chosen ones, your silence wasn't just silence, it was evidence. Evidence that you were never threatened, never attached, never competing, and never chained to the same emotional frequency as those who wished to see you crumble. They launched rumor after rumor, insult after insult, accusation after accusation, hoping to drag you into a wrestling match you never signed up for. But you continued with your life like someone who had bigger plans than addressing nonsense. While they rehearsed new ways to mention your name, you were upgrading your personal, emotional, financial, mental, and social life. While they were busy scripting drama, you were busy building your future. It wasn't a battle, it was a public display of who had direction and who didn't. People began noticing that everything negative they said about you required planning, emotion, and repetition. They had to think about you, talk about you, strategize about you, and monitor you to collect material. Meanwhile, you weren't giving them even half a sentence in return. And that reality screamed louder than any defense statement you could have made. Chosen ones, understand this. Not reacting is one of the strongest reactions in existence, because it shows you're not on the same frequency. When people saw how frantically emotional they were about you, and how calmly indifferent you remained about them, the entire perception flipped. The watchers, the listeners, the neutral parties all began to wonder, what could possibly make someone invest so much hate into a person who doesn't even acknowledge them? And here's the part that stung the haters the most, the realization that your silence was confidence, not defeat. They wanted you to get upset. They wanted you to defend yourself. They wanted to see you panic, lash out, or spiral. But when none of that happened, their narrative collapsed, because nothing is more frustrating to someone who wants to see you fall than witnessing you rise higher without responding. Every time your haters spoke, they added emotional weight to their own reputation. Every time you stayed silent, you added value to yours. Chosen ones, your calmness became a psychological mirror, one that reflected everything they lacked. When someone tries to provoke you and you don't react, it becomes clear that they are not your equal. They are your lesson. Their desperation exposed their fear. Their obsession exposed their envy. Their aggression exposed their insecurity. People do not fight passionately against what they do not consider a threat. Nobody wastes strategic energy on someone they consider irrelevant. So the harder they tried to attack you, the more they accidentally convinced the world that you were someone worth obsessing over. And here's the deeper truth. You didn't out-argue them, you outgrew them. You didn't step into the arena because you were already beyond that level of existence. Conflict requires two active participants. If one refuses to enter, then it becomes performance art, not a battle. While they were drowning in emotional effort, you were floating in peace. While they used their voice to tear you down, you used your silence to build yourself up. And eventually, everyone around could see that you were not avoiding the fight. You were simply not interested in lowering yourself for entertainment. The moment people recognized that, they began switching sides, not out of pity, but out of logic. They saw who was thriving and who was spiraling. They saw who had control and who had chaos. They saw who was focused on goals and who was obsessed with gossip. And the conclusion became undeniable. You won without playing. Chosen ones, remember this forever. When someone uses all their energy against you and you use none against them, everyone learns who was truly powerful. Their obsession exposed them. Your peace crowned you. Number 6. They recycled your past while you were busy becoming a new version of yourself. When they tried to chain you to your past, they only proved they never left their own. My dear chosen ones, let's shine a bright light on one of the most embarrassing ways their gossip backfired. They exposed themselves as time travelers who only know how to live in yesterday, while you were leveling up mentally, emotionally, financially, creatively, or spiritually. They were out there replaying old scenes like a broken radio that refuses to catch a new signal. They didn't realize that every story they repeated about the old you didn't diminish your value. It magnified how long they've remained stuck. They wanted to convince people that you were still operating from an outdated version of yourself, yet they couldn't see that the only outdated thing left was their mindset, not your journey. Chosen ones, let me speak to your heart. You outgrew the rooms, patterns, relationships, beliefs, and behaviors they were talking about long before they ever began gossiping. You had already walked out of that chapter, sealed it, and turned the page. But they were still standing there with a magnifying glass, trying to analyze a version of you that no longer exists. They thought that dragging your past into the present would stall your growth, when in reality, it only highlighted the distance between who you were then and who you are now. They grabbed your old files as if that was your final identity, forgetting that growth is not a rumor. It's a reality that speaks louder than any whisper ever will. While they were busy rewinding, you were busy rewriting. While they replayed memories, you were building momentum. And while they were clinging to the old chapter, you were standing in new territory they will never access with their outdated mindset. That is the unmissable contrast. One person trapped in recollection, the other actively evolving in real time. And chosen ones, evolution is the hardest evidence to argue against. You didn't defend yourself because your transformation defended you. Your maturity spoke for you. Your progress testified for you. Their gossip may have been loud, but your growth was undeniable. What they failed to realize is that anyone who intentionally drags your past into conversations is silently confessing that your present intimidates them. If your current life didn't bother them, they wouldn't be so desperate to resurrect the old version. Think about it. People only pull up old receipts when they have nothing new to challenge or criticize. And because they couldn't find anything to attack in your current reality, they rummaged through history hoping something would stick. But chosen ones, you can't stain what has already transformed. You can't discredit what has already elevated. You can't belittle someone who no longer identifies with the person you're describing. This is where their gossip crashed. People watching noticed the energy gap. They noticed one person growing, evolving, shifting and expanding, while the other remained mentally anchored to yesterday. And when there is that much contrast between someone's past and present, the gossip begins to sound foolish, outdated, and desperate. Observers didn't see your past as a problem. They saw your evolution as proof. They didn't wonder whether the gossip was true. They wondered why the storyteller was still obsessed. The real question that formed in people's minds wasn't, "What did you do back then?" It was, "Why are you still talking about it?" Chosen ones, never underestimate how loudly silence can communicate success. You didn't need speeches. You didn't need explanations. You didn't need to defend, argue, or clarify. You just needed to keep evolving. Growth is the loudest clapback and the most mature revenge. You see, they believed repeating old stories would make others doubt your progress, but it only made people admire your transformation even more, because anyone can talk, but not everyone can grow. Your life today became the strongest proof that their gossip was expired material. Their fixation on your past ended up spotlighting their inability to grow out of their own. And nothing exposes a person faster than comparing who they are now to who they used to be. Because while you were leveling up privately, they were declining publicly without even realizing it. So chosen ones, hold your head high. Let them talk about chapters they never understood. Let them narrate a storyline they're no longer qualified to speak on. Let them cling to the old while you build the new. Because every time they referenced your past, they unknowingly advertised your evolution. And evolution always wins because it turns every story into evidence. Their gossip didn't take you backward. It just confirmed how far forward you've already gone. Number 7. Trying to build scandals. Around someone with no chaos, only raised eyebrows at them. When they tried to create drama around someone untouched by chaos, they became the only question mark in the story. My dear chosen ones, this part cuts deep because it exposes a psychological truth most people ignore. Attacking someone who has no scandal, no chaos, no history of manipulation, and no pattern of messy behavior doesn't make the attacker look brave. It makes them look desperate. When someone throws accusations at a person whose life has been consistent, intentional and aligned, the world doesn't wonder what's wrong with the chosen one. They start wondering what's wrong with the accuser. It becomes less about the rumor and more about the root. And the root is always insecurity, envy, fear, and a craving for relevance. That's why, chosen ones, you never had to clap back. Your track record did every bit of talking for you. You see, when someone targets a person with no known history of harm, no pattern of shady behavior, and no obvious reason for suspicion, it immediately triggers something in people's subconscious. Why would someone be trying so hard to paint a bad picture of someone who has never shown anything but growth, focus, discipline, or calm? Humans may not always speak their thoughts aloud, but they observe with sharp internal radar. People are not as gullible as your haters assumed. They may watch quietly, but they analyze deeply. And while the haters thought they were building a narrative, the audience was building a conclusion, and the conclusion was not in the haters' favor. Chosen ones, your calm became your credibility. Your silence became your evidence. Your consistency became your protection. While they were rushing to speak, you continued to simply be, and nothing is more powerful than a life that supports itself through visible actions instead of verbal defense. People always trust the person who doesn't need to justify who they are. Do you know why? Because truth doesn't run, lies do. When someone is innocent, they're not panicked. They don't scramble for allies, screenshots, or witnesses. They keep living. And that alone became the loudest message in the room. Meanwhile, the haters unintentionally became the center of suspicion. Every time they repeated your name, exaggerated a story, hinted at drama, or tried to plant seeds of doubt, it backfired. Instead of people thinking, maybe something is wrong with you, they thought, why are you so invested? The psychology behind it is simple. When there is no logical cause for an attack, the attacker becomes the subject of analysis. And the more they talked, the more people started to notice patterns, not in your life, but in their behavior. Their tone revealed insecurity, their exaggeration revealed emotional instability, their frequency revealed obsession, their insistence revealed motive. Chosen ones. It's almost comedic how they never stopped to think about how suspicious they looked. They thought volume equals validity. They believed repetition equals proof. They assumed intensity equals credibility. But what they didn't realize is that the world has seen this pattern play out countless times. Jealousy always pretends to be concern. Competition always disguises itself as advice. And insecurity always masks itself as moral judgment. What they meant for your downfall turned into a psychological spotlight exposing their internal battle. And here's where it hits hardest. When someone tries to damage a person with no scandals, it highlights that the attacker needed a story to feel relevant. They needed drama because their identity wasn't strong enough without it. You didn't give them a reason to talk, so they manufactured one. They needed your name because their own didn't hold weight. That is the ultimate form of unintentional self-exposure. People began to recognize that there was no alignment between who you are in real life and what was being said about you. Real-world evidence always beats spoken allegations. Anyone who interacted with you, watched you move, or observed your decisions found no match to the drama they were hearing. And when reality doesn't support rumors, rumors become confessions. Confessions of envy, of lack, of personal insecurity, of deep internal comparison. Chosen ones, your clean reputation was not just protection, it was a mirror. It reflected everything your haters didn't want others to notice about them. Every time you ignored their attempt to provoke you, it became clear that their war wasn't real, it was imagined. And nothing makes an accuser crumble faster than a target who refuses to enter the arena. So remember this, when someone tries to stain what's spotless, the stain appears on their hands, not on the surface they aimed to ruin. Their attempts did not damage you, they revealed them. Their accusations did not lower your value, they lowered their credibility. Their noise did not distort your truth. It amplified your authenticity. And now, dear chosen ones, the world is not asking, "What did you do?" They are asking, "Why were they so obsessed?" Number 8. Their obsessive monitoring said more about their insecurities than their words ever could. My dear chosen ones, let's unfold this truth with clarity, precision, and the power of awareness. There is a massive difference between someone who simply has a casual opinion about you and someone who makes you their private research project. When people only offer a passing comment, it fades like background noise. But when they begin remembering dates, timestamps, reactions, patterns, appearances, and social moves with accuracy that even you don't recall, it stops being casual conversation and becomes behavioral documentation. And whether they intended to or not, those individuals crossed a line from harmless commentary into full-blown surveillance, and everyone around them eventually noticed. It didn't matter how they tried to present it. Friendly concern, casual updates, inside information, or just sharing, because the level of detail they possessed gave them away. They weren't just talking, they were tracking. They weren't just observing, they were monitoring. They weren't just curious, they were invested, highly invested. And chosen ones, you need to hear this. No one studies what they consider irrelevant. People only pour that level of focus into someone who either fascinates them, intimidates them, threatens them, or represents something they wish they could become. They may have masked it behind sarcasm, mockery, or negative commentary, but interest doesn't lie. If you look at someone long enough to criticize everything they do, what you're revealing is not dislike, but fixation. When outsiders began noticing how well-informed these individuals were about the timeline of your life, the reaction shifted. It was no longer, "Oh, they must really dislike that person." It became, "Why do they know so much?" The more details they shared, the more they unintentionally highlighted how deeply they had been observing you. Why did they know when you made changes in your lifestyle? Why did they know the exact people you were around? Why did they know the dates you posted something, deleted something, or reacted to something? Why were they recalling your past as if it were their personal biography? And most importantly, why were they so emotionally charged about someone who wasn't even focused on them? Chosen ones, this is one of the clearest signs that social perception flipped in your favor. They believed their level of monitoring made their opinions valid, but instead it exposed how much mental space they had allocated to you. You were on your journey, upgrading your life, creating new chapters, shaping your character, and focusing on your evolution. Meanwhile, they were busy collecting screenshots in their mind. You were living life, they were studying it. You were moving forward, they were pressing pause and rewind. You were growing, they were observing growth instead of initiating their own. That contrast spoke louder than anything you could have ever explained. What people eventually realized is that this wasn't casual awareness. It was emotional investment disguised as criticism. Real disinterest doesn't look like memorization. It looks like detachment. Real indifference doesn't look like constant updates. It looks like moving on. Real neutrality doesn't look like analyzing your life frame by frame. It looks like focusing on one's own journey. When a person continuously discusses you with high-resolution memory, it says more about their internal state than anything it could ever say about your lifestyle, personality, or choices. Chosen ones, their level of observation became an unintentional mirror reflecting what they feared to admit. They were intrigued. Something about you triggered analysis mode in their mind. It may have been your resilience, your direction, your confidence, your transformation, your potential, or simply your unpredictable evolution. They didn't know what version of you would appear next, and that unpredictability created curiosity. The kind that people feel towards those who stay rare, not common. You were never ordinary, and people react to the uncommon with fascination they don't know how to verbalize honestly. The most revealing part came when people noticed that you weren't watching them at all. You weren't asking about them, tracking them, updating others about them, or recalling their personal timeline. The psychological imbalance became impossible to ignore. One side was deeply attentive, the other side wasn't paying attention at all. That is when respect flowed in your direction without you requesting it. You didn't win with words. You won with emotional freedom. Their surveillance didn't make you look suspicious. It made them look preoccupied. It didn't make you look questionable. It made them look unsettled. It didn't make you appear dramatic. It made them appear consumed. And eventually, everyone around saw the truth. Obsession looks a lot like admiration that can't be admitted out loud. They became the watchers. And chosen ones, you became the one worth watching. Number 9. The way their stories matched too perfectly proved it was strategy, not truth. When their stories started sounding like a script, the crowd realized it was a performance, not the truth. There comes a moment, my dear chosen ones, when gossip stops sounding like messy conversation and begins sounding like coordinated theater, and that's exactly when the mask falls off. Because when different people, who don't even share the same closeness or experiences with you, suddenly start repeating the same storyline, using identical wording, tone, and emotional inflection, something feels off, not just to you, but to anyone listening. People may not always know the truth immediately, but they can feel when something has been rehearsed. Humans are wired to detect patterns, and when a rumor starts sounding copy-pasted instead of lived, it triggers suspicion faster than any denial ever could. And chosen ones, that's where the tables silently turned. When those individuals kept pushing the same recycled narrative, it didn't sound like concern, truth-sharing, or personal opinion anymore. It sounded like a group campaign, a coordinated effort, a mission. The world didn't hear sincerity, they heard choreography. Their tone didn't say, "I know something." It said, "I was trained to repeat something." And that's where their plan began to fall apart, because real truth stands on its own, but lies always need a team to survive. It's almost funny if you think about it, the way they broke character without realizing it. One person planted a rumor, the next person watered it, and the third person tried to add emotional theatrics to make it feel more believable. But rather than creating a convincing story, they exposed the weakness of their strategy. It felt like watching a group project, the kind where everyone contributes, not because they care, but because they want to feel included. And in the end, people started asking themselves the most powerful question. Why are so many of them focused on the same person? That question alone was enough to shift perception, because coordinated negativity doesn't read as truth. It reads as jealousy. It reads as fear. It reads as group insecurity disguised as group revelation. And chosen ones, here's what they never expected: that their unity wouldn't make them look believable. It would make them look intimidated. When 3 or 4 voices join together to attack one name, the world stops looking at the target and starts looking at the attackers, trying to figure out what makes one person so powerful that it takes a whole committee to discredit them. And let's be honest, chosen ones, people gossip for 2 reasons: entertainment or envy. If it was entertainment, it would have been casual, inconsistent, and easily forgotten. But because it was envy, it was rehearsed, synchronized, and obsessively repeated. They weren't just talking about you, they were aligning against you, and that alone exposed how threatened they felt. You don't need a coalition to speak truth. Truth stands confidently, even when spoken alone. Lies, however, crumble without backup dancers, hype men, and supporting actors. You didn't even have to defend yourself. Their coordinated negativity performed the exposure for you. People started seeing through the performances. They noticed how each person added the same dramatic tone, the same exaggerated examples, the same recycled wording. That's not how real experience sounds. Real experience is personal, emotional, and diverse because no two people experience a situation identically. But when their narratives matched word for word, it stopped sounding like multiple testimonies and started sounding like one insecure author with multiple narrators. That's when the crowd mentally stepped back and evaluated the situation. They started paying attention to body language, tone, facial expressions, and emotional inconsistencies. And all of it pointed to one truth. This wasn't about exposing you. This was about protecting their ego from your growth. Instead of proving your flaws, they proved their unity in discomfort. Instead of revealing who you are, they revealed who they are when threatened. Chosen ones, listen carefully. When people unite to bring you down, it is not a sign of your weakness, it is evidence of your impact. Nobody starts a rumor campaign about someone irrelevant. Nobody forms a verbal alliance against someone powerless. Nobody rehearses a story unless they are terrified of what the real story might become. Their plan wasn't to tell the world what happened. It was to control how the world saw you, and that intent destroyed their credibility far faster than any truth ever could. Real reputation is built on presence, consistency, and character. Theirs was built on whispers, alliances, and emotional projection. In the end, their synchronized gossip transformed into a spotlight on your individuality and a spotlight on their shared insecurity. They tried to ruin your image, but instead they revealed that yours was too strong to attack individually. That is not humiliation for you. That is confirmation. And now, the audience is no longer clapping for their performance. They're leaving the theater and celebrating you instead. And now, chosen ones, as everything becomes clear and every mask finally slips, this entire situation proves one thing. Impact speaks louder than accusation. Their gossip didn't break you, it broadcasted you. Their unity didn't expose your flaws, it exposed your influence. You didn't win because you fought, you won because truth doesn't panic. If this message resonated with your journey, show your strength by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and commenting 77, I rise regardless. Share this message so more chosen ones realize they were never the problem, they were the threat.